Ms. Hanna.
It's fortuitous.
Ms. Lisa Hanna.
Mr. Speaker, I give God thanks for the serenity.
Members, I'd love to hear Ms. Hanna address the Speaker.
No, man, you have to restart the clock, Mr. Speaker.
Just pay me the mind.
I give God thanks for the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I give thanks to my beloved Southeast Centre for again investing their trust in me for a third consecutive term. And it is the strength of the constituency and the constituents and the people across this great geography that has inspired me to fight on through some of my more difficult periods in my political career. I'm grateful to them, my constituency staff, my executive, certainly my Councillor Bell, who is here, yeah, man, and the comrade delegates for standing firm with me as we keep Southeast Centre strong, fortified, and resilient. I also wish to acknowledge and express my gratitude to the Leader of the Opposition, the Most Honourable Portia Simpson Miller, for the confidence reposed in me over the last term of government. Serving the people of Jamaica, particularly our young people, has been an unqualified privilege. Mr. Speaker, let me also place on record my appreciation to my former Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Cheryl Arigia Angus, my former board chairmen and members of various boards, the heads of agencies, and all the staff of the former Ministry of Youth and Culture, which I had the privilege to lead as minister, and we did some really good work together there, and we left some very important milestones for this country, Mr. Speaker. We did it in the best interest of Jamaica, and I want to thank them. My colleagues on both sides of the House, the parliamentary staff, you, Mr. Speaker, I give you thanks, and even though things can get a little rough at times, I think in the spirit of camaraderie, we do well to keep it all together. And finally, Mr. Speaker, to my family, Richard and Alexander, thank you for your undying love and support over these years. Mr. Speaker, on December 1, 2014, Americans spent a record $2.65 billion online. However, just weeks before, there was a much more significant online shopping event which took place, because on November 11 in China is considered Singles Day, the unofficial antithesis to Valentine's Day. It started in the 1990s by single college students, and today it is a mega event for online and noticeable online shopping. But Mr. Speaker, on November 11, 2014, Alibaba, China's biggest online e-tailer, recorded sales of more than $9.3 billion for a single day anywhere in the world. And to just put it in perspective, in one day, one Chinese company sold twice the national budget of Jamaica. Wow. Of the 1.8 trillion of new global economic activity in 2013, China alone accounted for 1 trillion, or 60% of it. That country is now the world's largest manufacturer, a country that liberalized its economy less than 40 years ago. In 1980, China had a per capita income of 200 US, and it has now grown that per capita by over 20 times. Believe it or not, of all the countries in the world, China has the most private billionaires, more than any other country. But it's not just China, Mr. Speaker. By 1990, between 1990 and 2010, the world's center of economic gravity had actually moved quickly, more quickly than it had ever done before in recorded history. Emerging economies such as India, Indonesia, Russia, and Brazil are now major forces in global manufacturing, and the manufacturing value added has doubled in real terms since 1990, from US 5 trillion to 10 trillion today. And that share of value added is generated by emerging economies, has also doubled, moving from 21% to about 39% over the past decade. Mr. Speaker, there is no new world coming. It is already here, and it is ever-changing and dynamic with no fixed rules for success or guaranteed patterns of protection to give us a head start against larger countries. That is why, Mr. Speaker, when I was minister, one of the principal goals that I had was to orient our youth around preparing to succeed in this global marketplace. So before we implemented anything, we actually went around the country and we engaged over 3,000 youth, including the thousands online. And coming out of those consultations, the National Youth Service added 8 new programs involving personal development, entrepreneurship, MOUs with the PSOJ to place youth in private entities and private sector job placement, scholarships for higher education, agricultural training and grants for rural youth, while at all times implementing a policy to reserve 10% of all spaces for youth with disabilities. Near and dear to my heart was the New Employment Opportunities NEO program, which is a joint venture between the Inter-American Development Bank and was signed off last year, November. Through the NYS, we led the process of developing a national program for youth at risk, which would bring together the resources of government and private sector firms to prepare and ensure placement for some 10,000 young people over a 3-year period. And I'm really glad to see that the government is continuing those 8 programs and this particular program, and I ask that you put your best efforts and interest in those programs. Mr. Speaker, with all the programs that we did for youth over the past 4 years, we were able to engage and train over 280,000 youth in this country, not including our online programs. But this is not enough to get us where we need to be and in the time we need to get it done. Mr. Speaker, our administration fixed the foundations and placed this economy on firm footing over the past 4 years. But for us to succeed and move our per capita income to higher levels for our people, we must position our local markets globally. As decision makers, we must have a clear understanding of what this world looks like, target those markets, and plan for the future purchasing potential and demand of the millennial generation and prepare our youth to take advantage of that. In the same way that Jamaican tech entrepreneur Kenya Mattis, co-founder of Listen Me Limited, positioned herself and was recently selected as the winner from over 10,000 applicants by the US State Department's Global Entrepreneurship Summit last week, our country must have that zeal. Today, the world is rooted in technology, with an economic axis that has shifted to the east and driven by millennials, persons between the ages of 16 to 36 years old, 1.7 billion of them around the world. Currently, in the United States, there's 80 million of them, and they spend an average of $600 million every year. In less than 10 years, 3 out of every 4 workers, or 75% globally, will be a millennial. By 2018, millennials will have the most spending power of any generation in our history, expecting to spend close to $3.39 trillion. Where are we positioned to take advantage of this market? Our mission is to ensure that we prepare ourselves to take full advantage as global producers rather than consumers marginalized by a world without boundaries. For this generation, mobile commerce will be a massive contributing factor, as 41% of this generation makes purchases using their smartphones or online media, and 48% of them say that social media influences their product purchases more than television advertisements. I want to commend my administration because the Universal Access Fund has been doing a very good job by providing tablets in the last administration to schools, and this was an excellent start. They also provided free Wi-Fi to most of the 250 locations where CAP sites are located. But we have to move further. If we are to position ourselves, we need to provide free Wi-Fi at every single school across this country, at every single transport center, at every single public market, at the airports, at every police station and post office, in every community with community hotspots, other words, Mr. Speaker, let us give our people the tools so that they will not be left behind. Jamaica needs to become one big hotspot so that we can give aspiring Kenya Mattis innovators across the country access to free data plans anywhere in this country for them to do business. Mr. Speaker, the child of a farmer who has graduated from university with a degree in marketing can add significant value to the agricultural industry by connecting her father with markets previously unavailable. From farm to table is a concept that is trending across the world and even here in Jamaica. With the exchange rate of 126 Jamaican to 1 US, agriculture is now the industry with the best competitive advantage against imports. Millennials are health-conscious individuals. They believe in fitness. They believe in wellness and nutrition. And they believe in nutrition. It's big on their agenda. And so they want organic chicken or yard fowl. They call it free-range chicken, we call it yard fowl. They want organic beef, we call it grass-fed beef. And they want chemical-free vegetables. I won't tell you what we fertilize the vegetables with. There are a lot of niches and export markets for these products with a very high value added. And we have over 200,000 people employed in agriculture, but not enough young people involved in taking it in a new direction, using technology to create better linkages with local and overseas markets. Yes, Mr. Speaker, we must encourage our youth to get involved in direct planning for succession planning. But we have the world's best coffee, ginger, and Scotch bonnet pepper, and chocolate tea. Yes. So let us give them priority access to land at concessionary terms and give them startup business plans and give them the right head start in agriculture. Mr. Speaker, we're losing too many of our skilled youth to overseas markets, and we're losing the best and our brightest of our university graduates and our skilled young people. And so I want to propose that we come up with incentives to actually keep them here. And this was something that we had in the works, and I urge the government to focus on it. One of such approach is to have the National Housing Trust build rental units specifically for tertiary graduates. These rental units would become available only to our young people between the ages of 20 to 30, during which time the rental rate would be 25% of their salary, single or combined, or whatever that salary happens to be, so that young people would be assured that whenever they leave university, they can find a place to start which is of a quality standard to provide the stability to build out their lives at a price that they can afford. And so while it is not exclusive to only rental, you can have a lease to buy. What you also want is a turnover of the property so that when those graduate and they can afford it, you have another set of young people actually coming into those rental units. As the asset remains with the Housing Trust, the rental costs would be contributing positively to their bottom line while giving young people an opportunity they truly deserve. Mr. Speaker, we must also double down on the BPO industry and become a leader in this industry. Right now, we're 43 in the world. We must move to the top 5 in the world in this industry. And it's not hard to do because the startup capital and the foreign exchange in terms of investment is not that very high. Mr. Speaker, we did a lot of work in culture and the creative economy. And certainly, we had a number of consultations. We left a business plan there funded by the World Bank. We did work with PSOJ. We had a National Creative Industries and Cultures Commission. And it spoke to the short-term to medium-term growth for young people who wanted to create wealth in culture and the creative economy. We went even further. We got Kingston designated as a creative city, and we also went out and got a World Heritage Site, the first time in our history in this country. But the creative economy can have economic transformation for this country and use young people in a way that has never been used before. The designers, the dressmakers, the singers, the students who are coming out of Edna Manley. And you have an ambassador who actually was a co-founder of the National Youth Orchestra, Dr. Nigel Clark, who understands what it means, even in terms of some of the soft power skills, to be able to get a young man or a young woman from the inner city, teach them to play an instrument. It gives them confidence, and it boosts their appeal to go forward in life. So what I'm proposing is that you give, because we did a lot of work with JCDC, and we actually created the linkages for this. Give more funds to Edna Manley, the sporting institutions, Sparrow Martin and his work with youngsters. Give more money to the JCDC, and certainly other, like the University Community Film Project, the Dreamer World Program, and a myriad of other legendary institutions. I guarantee you, if you do this for the creative economy in the same way that we do it for sport, you will find that you will be churning out individuals who will go across the world and make their mark and will bring back the money to this country. Finally, Mr. Speaker, we need to teach our youth to take on a worldview that is not only Jamaica-focused or CARICOM-focused, limited in its vision. In positioning Jamaica for growth, we must recognize that although we are next door to the United States, the world's largest market, it is a young man in China that is planning to ship things to the United States rather than us. That we need to be cognizant of the competition that exists around the world. So we need to broaden our horizons past CARICOM and look at population-rich countries. We need to look at Haiti, we need to look at Cuba, we need to look at Domre. And we need to understand and teach our youth that not because Trinidad is there, Trinidad as an English-speaking country is not more important than Cuba as a Spanish-speaking country, or Haiti as a French-speaking country. And our youth need to know this. And I support the Prime Minister in his call to have Spanish as a compulsory second language or even French. Mr. Speaker, you judge a country by the way it treats its children. And over the years, we've been positioning ourselves to be heard at UNICEF. We wanted to be heard in a very progressive and positive way since the Armadale tragedy in 2009. Compounding the issues was when I became minister, we had the suicidal tragedy of Vanessa Wint in 2012. When I visited the correctional facility immediately after the tragedy, I realized that while correctional facilities were not in my immediate purview as minister, it was clear that we needed a short-term, aggressive approach to stem the tide of the breaches that were taking place within our laws, our own laws, the Child Care and Protection Act, as well as the international conventions on the rights of the child, which we had signed. Mr. Speaker, when I was minister, I actually put in place and chaired the Interministerial Committee for Children in 2013, which involved all the major ministries of children: health, justice, education, national security, labor and social security. And we also had the Office of the Children's Advocate that sat on that interministerial. The approach yielded great results and saw the separation of children from adult correctional facilities, as well as police lockups, the introduction of the Arts for Life program at the South Camp facility for girls, the allocation of increased resources to help find missing children, so that we started to find 9 out of every 10 children that went missing. And we were also able to have a 50% reduction in violence in schools under the Safe Schools program. More children were being removed from state care and put in family environments. We also had more removal of children from state care from uncontrollable behavior, the introduction of the restorative justice system, the introduction of the SMILES mobile unit to help children with counseling. Additional resources were found to build child-friendly spaces at police stations across the country, and the introduction of the Children's Advisory Panel, and then the implementation of the Keating Report. So by the time we got to Switzerland last year, January, to present our report at the Convention of the Rights Committee, we had solid strides, and we were no longer on our back foot and being defensive. So much so that only recently, UNICEF actually hailed Jamaica, and we moved up by 52 spaces to now be ranked 51 out of 163 countries globally in the most recent UNICEF Kids Index. So, Kids' Right Index, demonstrating that children in Jamaica today are reportedly enjoying better protection of their rights than those living in some developed countries as Luxembourg, China, Greece, Canada, Italy, and such regional states as Trinidad and Tobago and Ghana. But Mr. Speaker and colleagues, there's a larger issue that I want to bring to your attention, and quite frankly, it is something that is very dear to me. Quite recently, I was able to implore the U.S. Embassy to bring down Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, a Jamaican who is internationally acclaimed, and she's a CEO of the Center for Youth Wellness in California. And she looks at how to revolutionize children and their reactions to toxic stress and pediatric care, and how to really get children to understand and countries to understand that toxic stress, if not addressed in children, and stress can actually result in a serious deleterious effect towards our public health system. And she actually says and concludes that if the early adversity of this kind of stress continues, it harms the developing brains and bodies of children if not addressed, and will have devastating results on our society. And she has proven that diabetes and cancer actually forms itself when children actually have this kind of stress and it's not addressed. There are other studies by Dr. Maureen Sams-Vaughan, Dr. Leiber. There are other studies by Gibson and Lowe in depression in adolescence. And I can tell you that while I was minister, what I witnessed firsthand, the kind of depression that I saw in children, the kind of impact of violence in their homes and communities, and how it affected their emotional well-being. Many of our children are suffering actually in silence, and would share with me some of this and what kind of harmful lifestyle choices they were moving towards. And so some had thoughts of suicide, and we had to move them in a right direction. That is why we also implemented the Smiles Mobile Clinic. Mr. Speaker, our goals as leaders must be to improve the lives of all Jamaican children. It doesn't matter if we're on that side or this side. All our goals must supersede personal rancor, bitterness. It must supersede partisan approaches and tribal politics. If we don't do this, it will impede the development of a generation that is coming. And I dare say it hampers the best development potential, because I guarantee you, children who are being born today are much smarter than even our generation that is here currently. So I want to urge the current administration to keep the interministerial committee that is currently in place so that all entities can sit at the same table and not work in silos. It works, Minister. But I want to go further, because to win this major battle, collaborative efforts are required. I'm using this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to call for a joint parliamentary committee to specifically look at the impact of toxic stress and violence on our nation's children. The number of murder-suicides taking place in this country come from a very deep, unaddressed, and deep societal issues, stress issues in these children's lives who become adults over time. And our child guidance clinics are underfunded and understaffed, and we have to address it. In my discussions with Dr. Burke Harris, the U.S. Embassy, and other stakeholders, they have indicated that they're prepared to help in this area. And so, while I was minister, JSIF had committed $60 million, Minister, to assist with building a facility to help children with counseling. I believe that this is something that can be continued, and I urge the current government to continue where we left off. I also call on the government to enact the legislation that was developed by our administration on the instructions of the Most Honorable Portia Simpson Miller, outlining harsher penalties for child abusers, molesters, rapists, and those who know and don't report it. It came here. We need to bring it back, and we need to get it enacted. But the truth is, Mr. Speaker, even with all of this, until some of the big man them, and as my leader would say, some of the long, gray back men, until they stop troubling their own people, own children, and other people's children, we will come here every year and we will continue to have these problems in our society. Because the truth is, I was tired, I was frustrated, I was devastated as minister and as a Jamaican, because the kinds of reports that I would see, and as a mother, because the kinds of reports I would see coming to my desk every day about death, rape, taxi man raping off little boys, neglect, brutal beatings of children. I couldn't believe that I was a Jamaican living in this country. And what would happen is that there is no report that is exclusive to a particular profession. When a child spoke about who abused them, It crossed a range of professions. And the other problem was that you couldn't get it from report to arrest, because by the time those particular persons came and implored the family to keep quiet, the silence continued. So I urged the minister as well, and he said he would continue to break the silence campaign, because the reports are not enough. We have to start getting some convictions of some big people in this country to set an example that enough is enough. Mr. Speaker, we in this House have to admit and start talking up the things, because it is only when we champion their cause in a space such as this House that those who have suffered in silence for years can confront their pain and not see it as shame. It will begin a road to healing for this country and break the cycle of generational abuse, which is a real and present danger. Children must be allowed to be children. Give them the space. Give them the space to have their childhood and protect them. They are not to be pimped and hustled by their mothers, their fathers, or anybody else in this society. And if we know about it, please report it. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I got a seat as a young woman at the highest decision-making table of this country. And I got it because out of the goodness and respect of the leader of my party, former Prime Minister, Portia Simpson Miller. Every young person can have that. And in spite of everything, in spite of the tight fiscal space, in spite of the new kid on the block, in spite of the cussing, Babsy and others, in spite of a number of things, regional management duties, constituency duties, family duties, I was fortunate to be a part of a team that piloted legislation and policy initiatives aimed at protecting children, specifically those who have been in conflict with the law. As a team, we ensured that children were no longer held in detention centers with adults. We ensured that all youth initiatives included those who were marginalized as a result of their socioeconomic reality. We ensured that certainly those who had mental and other social inabilities were included. We led the engagement of Jamaicans, home and abroad, in a memorable and highly successful celebration of Jamaica's 50th anniversary of independence. We spearheaded the successful lobby for Jamaica's first ever election to the important World Heritage Committee of UNESCO, leading to the coveted inscription of Jamaica's Blue and Jumper Mountains, just to name a few. Mr. Speaker, whether I am in government or whether I'm in opposition, I'm committed to the same goal, that of improving the people's lives in this country. I ask that all of us continue to live with that mission, and may all of us grow in wisdom and in strength, and God protect all of us as we go forward on that mission to improve people's lives.